Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Maile, and today we're going to talk about books, which I feel like I haven't talked about on my channel in a long time. So I'm super excited. Before we jump in, if you're new here, we do lots of fun things on this channel, book content, but also shopping videos, grocery hauls, DIY home projects, just vlogs of our daily life and travel. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, we are getting very close to our first subscriber goal. So definitely hit that red subscribe button so that you don't miss any of our videos and come along with us for the fun, because we're always doing something crazy around here, okay? And today I'm going to be talking about the little bit of a book slump that I've been in, and I'll tell you why. But I have read 5 books this month and I want to share them with you because they kind of are all over the place, honestly. So I'm excited to dive in to these titles. Some like super anticipated of the year that disappointed me, some that were really surprisingly, amazingly good, some like a classic series that I finally started. So lots of fun things to talk about. Let's get on into it. And the first thing we're gonna get into is the fact that I think I'm in a book slump. So that's not good. I have read, I believe, 57 books so far this year. And I have been trending ahead on my book goal all year long until I hit the month of July. So I, for the first time ever, would like to read 100 books in a year. I got really close last year. I think I read like 89 maybe-ish. And I have been really pushing, reading a lot of great books, just like hitting my stride this whole first half of the year. And then we got super busy in July. Eric and I, if you don't know, are currently directing the musical Something Rotten at our local community theater, and it has taken a lot out of us. We tend to go all in on shows, and there's kind of not much time or room for anything else in our life. So that's what's happening. That's why I'm in a book slump, and I have been very behind on my reading. I am now behind my reading goal, which is not good, but still, I did manage to read 5 books this month, which honestly, with everything I've had going on, I'm really proud of, and I'm pushing in August to just keep going and read more than that. So the next couple of months that we're going to be doing this show are a little iffy and light on books. I'll just put it that way. So that's my book slump saga, but let's get into talking about these 5 books that I did read this month. So first, I read For the Love of Men by Liz Plank. And Eric actually recommended this book to me a couple of years ago. It was so fascinating. So Liz Plank is just a super cool person. Look how fun her picture on the back of her book is. She's just so cute. She wrote this amazing nonfiction book all about masculinity and how toxic masculinity has not just affected women, but obviously affected men too, and how our society is kind of built around this ideal of masculinity, and the way boys are raised is so nuanced and informed by what it means to be a man. And it was just so layered and fascinating. I will say it was dry at times, but the things that she talks about in this book were just so, I won't even say eye-opening, just honestly reading it was kind of like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that is why that is like that. I understand. I see the tie you're making. Like, yep, that is exactly our world. You've hit the nail on the head. Like, it was very much not necessarily telling me things that blew my mind because I had never thought about them before, but it was just a way that articulated the problem of toxic masculinity from the male perspective that I hadn't really like taken a lot of time to sit down and think and consider why men are the way they are and why toxic behaviors are so ingrained in our culture. It was just very fascinating and a little depressing, but honestly really good, really thought-provoking. Definitely recommend this book. You have to be in the mood and like want to know about it, because I will say the one negative, I thought it would have more humor and Liz's like super fun personality threaded through it, and there were like glimpses of that, but it wasn't, I don't know, it's a very serious book. At times it read like a dissertation, and I just wanted it to be a little more zhuzhed with personality. And I don't really know if that's a fair assessment of a nonfiction book about toxic masculinity, but what can I say? I think I gave it 4 stars though, and I recommend the audiobook because she narrates it, and she is a fabulous audiobook narrator. So I loved this book, it was really good. Okay, next I read a really amazing book called A Gentleman in Moscow, which was just so unique. I loved the premise of this book. It was a very interesting and different type of read for me. It was about a count in like the 1920s in Bolshevik Russia after the revolution, who, because he was a member of the aristocracy, was like sentenced to house arrest. And he lived in this fancy hotel, like in one of their giant suites with like all his family heirlooms, and his family had lived there for generations. And he gets sentenced for the rest of his life to serve house arrest in that hotel. He has to like downgrade to their provided room and like move his life into a very small hotel room. Had to live out at this hotel for the rest of his life. It follows the whole trajectory of his life and people that work in the hotel that he gets close to, how he chooses to pass his time, and through circumstances I won't explain because I don't want to spoil things, he ends up raising a little girl, and you watch him become a parent and raise her up in this hotel, and all the fun of like Eloise vibes of a kid growing up in a fancy hotel. Meanwhile, more revolution and political unrest is happening, and they hit a point where it's not really safe to be there, and some things happen because of that I can't really say because it's a spoiler. But it's just a really fascinating look at how this man lived a life that was very, very small, but managed to fill it with things that fulfilled him and relationships that forged connections despite him literally having to stay at this hotel for the rest of his life. It was such a sweet book, and it had a political underlying element to it that was very fascinating. A little hard to understand at times, I will say. It could have been because at parts I was listening to the audiobook and multitasking work at the theater. So if I had like sat down and read all of it, I read most of it, but the audiobook portions when I was multitasking, I could have probably paid a little bit better attention. But it was a very fascinating read, not super fast paced, not super like edge of your seat, more just fascinating all the way through. The character development is amazing. The characters are super fleshed out, very deep, just very sweet moments to see people care for him and him care for others despite like his circumstances of literally never being able to leave this hotel. It just, I loved it. It was so good. And the ending, I have thoughts about the ending that, again, I can't really share because they're spoilers, but let's just say that if you have read the book, my take is that he went on to go where he needed to go. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You know. Okay, anyway, I loved that book. It was just a nice turn your brain off, fall in love with some characters kind of vibes. Very, very good. I believe I also gave that one 4 stars. Wow, we're starting off strong. Okay, well, now we should talk about something that was a little, honestly, I can't even just say a little, it was more than a little disappointing. I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. Let me just tell you guys, a little backstory, okay? If you've never watched one of my book videos before, I am an Ali Hazelwood stan, okay? I love this lady. I eat up all her books. I think I've given every single one of her books 5 stars, except for Bride. I did not give Bride 5 stars, although I liked it. It was just not my vibes. I hated this book. Like with a fiery burning passion, I hated it. And it was so anticipated, I could not wait. It was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. And it was over the top disappointing. And here's the deal. Here's what I'll say. Ali Hazelwood clearly has a formula with her books. I am a fan of her formula. From the very, very beginning, she told us, this book is different. This is different from my normal formula. So just be warned. And what I will say is she has branched out before. Like when she wrote Check and Mate, that was not her normal formula. And that may be my favorite book of hers. Like I loved that book. Bride, certainly not her normal formula. And I still enjoyed it, although it wasn't like 100% for me. So that did not scare me off when she was like, this isn't my typical formula. There are some trigger warnings. There's some different type of romance written than what I normally do. It didn't scare me off, okay, is what I'm trying to say. I was like, I'll still love it because I love her writing. I just think she is such a clever writer. But here's the freaking deal, okay? right off the bat, honestly, I felt serious Abby Jimenez vibes. Abby Jimenez is a romance writer that writes more deep characters who have a lot of trauma, especially her most recent book, Just for the Summer, which I adored. There are some very heavy themes explored, and the romance is very complicated because of those heavy themes of the characters' trauma that they've been through. And it works. The way Abby Jimenez crafts that story and her characters just pulls at your heartstrings, makes you totally connect with the characters, have empathy for them. The plot moves along beautifully. It's just a 5-star all around, the way that she chooses to write her romance. And truly, this felt like Ali Hazelwood trying to be Abby Jimenez and failing so badly, like failing more than I could possibly ever have imagined her failing. It was so bad. It was so bad. So, quick summary, it's about an engineer named Rue who works at this like small startup that, well, it's not technically a startup anymore. This company that was started by one of her mentors, her best friend works there. It's a very tight-knit group, the three of them. It's some sort of engineering firm where they develop biotech. I don't even know, bro. I don't know what it means, but they get taken over by like a company investing in them and doing this like investigation, and Rue develops a relationship with one of the guys who is part of the company that's coming in and taking over. And basically it's like the company taking over is threatening all their jobs, is looking into the ethics of the company. Things are coming out about it that maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be, and there's some shady business going on behind the scenes that they didn't know about. So that premise is very exciting and is very Ali Hazelwood. Like, that sounds right up my alley. And truly, that plot was more interesting to me than any of the romance or characters. The characters, the two main characters, were so incredibly devoid of personality. It actually shook me to my core, because Ali Hazelwood, one of her strongest points, and something I love so much about the way she writes, is how she crafts a character. She makes them all unique, silly, weird, like offbeat, just super specific and die hard themselves, okay, to their detriment. Like, that's what I love so much about the characters. You know who they are. They are layered, they are nuanced, they have personality, okay? They're horrible. They have no personality. They have no, like, to the point where, like, even I didn't care about their flaws. Like, their flaws didn't even piss me off, because I just didn't care about them at all enough to even be mad when they did stuff I thought was stupid. Like, I was totally and completely uninvested. The main character is basically like a monotone girl with no emotional depth, no feeling. She's like so closed off and so just like brick wall up that you never really get in her head enough to understand what's going on in there. The guy, his entire personality is like being the guy that's gonna crack her and break her open and gonna be there for her and crack her shell. And I couldn't tell you one defining characteristic about him as an actual person. Like, his character was not developed at all. He was just over the top, like, I love this girl and I'm gonna wait on her, and it was just cheesy and icky, and I hated it. It felt like she was writing trauma for the sake of writing trauma, not because it was important to talk about or would help someone going through similar situations reading it. It just was like, I'm going for shock value here, or I'm going for like depth because I mostly write fluffy characters and I want to do something different. Like, it just felt so off-putting and weird, and like, she totally did not hit the nail on the head, okay? The nail was way far away from where her hammer was swinging. It was just very bad. It was very bad. And then the culmination of the company being taken over, that whole plot line, which, like I said, was more interesting to me than the characters and what was going on with them. It ended in a super weird, dumb way that was just like, really? That's how you're gonna make it end? It just, I hated it. I literally hated it. It was so bad. Her next book that comes out better be freaking amazing. That's all I have to say, because no. Can you tell I'm a little fired up? I think I gave it 2 stars. I was just so mad reading it. So mad reading it. Gosh. Okay, so moving right along. The next book I read was a book that surprised me so much. It's called Lovely War. And The only reason I saw it and picked it up to read it was because one of the booktubers I follow, my favorite booktuber, Destiny Sidwell, she read it and she was like, this is a very surprising 5-star read. Like, she loved it. And she told me the premise, and she told me specifically, she called me up on the phone and she's telling me about it. No, I watched a video where she talked to her audience about this book. That's what I mean by she told me. It's about 2 different love stories, so 4 total characters in World War I, but it's told through a lens of Greek gods and goddesses. So it starts with Aphrodite, and she gets caught in a love affair with, I don't know, the god of war. What's his name? Can't remember. He's not important. He's the bad guy. And her husband comes and puts her on trial, I guess. I don't know. The framing of it with the Greek gods and goddesses is hard to explain without it sounding really weird and stupid, but it's actually really fascinating and interesting. So basically, she has to tell him the story of how she creates love, and the reason she does this, I can't really talk about because it's a spoiler, but it becomes clear why she's doing it, to make her husband understand her a little better. So she tells the story of these 2 people that she followed during the war, that she kind of helped along and guided their love story, protected them, kept them safe, and they illustrated how pure and precious love can be. They had the sweetest love story. They meet and basically instantly fall in love. He gets unexpectedly drafted a couple days later. They have a long distance like pen pal relationship. They end up meeting, finding each other, falling in love. Things go awry a little bit, but ultimately things work out happily for them. And then the other couple is an interracial couple, a little more mature, French woman and a Black musician that's in the army band. I don't know what they call it, but they meet and develop a love for each other through their shared love of music, and their relationship is, they have to face a lot of hardships, obviously, and Aphrodite also helps them along and guides them and protects them. It's just really a very unique story, especially the structure of how the story is told. It's very much like a war, historical fiction, romance type vibes. Honestly, it leans more fiction than it does romance, although the characters I love, they are just so well built. They feel like real people. You see so much of like their emotions and the inner thoughts of their brains, and it just makes them very lovable and interesting, and just you want to keep reading. It's a very compelling story, both of the love stories and the war stories, and you're kind of curious the whole time about why the framing of Aphrodite telling this story, what it has to do with anything, and it all wraps up very nicely at the end and you totally understand and get it. It ties it with a nice bow. It makes it even more unique. I'm telling you, I haven't really read a book that's structured this way, and I really enjoyed it. It very much surprised me because when I first heard the premise, I was like, that could be really good, or it could also be really bad. And I trust Destiny Sidwell, so that's why I decided to read it, and I'm so glad I did. I really, really loved it. Especially if you like war books and historical fiction, you will definitely love this book. You really should read it. I just loved it. It was fabulous. I can't remember if I gave it 5 stars or 4 stars, but I gave it a very high rating because it was so, so, so good. Okay, and then I finished out the month with reading, finally, the first book in the Game of Thrones series. Yes, I finally read Game of Thrones. If you know me at all, you know that I have a very intense obsession with House of the Dragon. I love that show so much. Love, love, love Game of Thrones. Was very obsessed with Game of Thrones as well. I love House of the Dragon more. I know that's crazy, and I know that's way not everyone else's opinion, but I just love it, okay? So don't come for me. I love it so much. Anyway, so I was like, you know what? I would love those books. I'm itching for another like big series to start. I'm definitely gonna read Game of Thrones. All I can say is I can't believe it took me this long, okay? It was so good. It was so good. And you know what's funny is Eric's always told me, because he read them way before the show came out, and he's always told me that the books differ so much from the series, but the first book really doesn't. The first book is pretty much exactly the first season of Game of Thrones. And you would think that that would make me not as excited to read it, and like maybe it would feel like a little like, okay, let's get through this first one that I already know all the plot points for, just so I can, you know, continue the story and get into the really good books that are different from the series. No, I was on the edge of my seat. Even though I knew everything that was going to happen and it was pretty much exactly the same, I loved every second of it. Let me just tell you, that writing, George R.R. Martin, there's a reason that they made such a successful show out of that book, because he is a freaking genius when it comes to crafting a world, writing compelling, very complex characters. He is an impeccable writer. I just kept sitting there thinking like, oh my gosh, he is such a good author. He's such a good writer. He is amazing. He's so good. Because the book doesn't really have a lot of like roller coaster. It's much more political than fantasy feeling. And I know Eric's told me that later on in the books, more fantasy elements come to the forefront, but this one was a very like political, dense at times series. And it didn't matter. I loved it so freaking much. I loved every tiny little detail about the history and about characters, just any and everything. I was eating it up. And I really credit that to his writing. It was just so freaking good. What I loved most, I think, about it was that it's told in a bunch of different character perspectives. So you'll get a chapter about Sansa, you'll get a chapter about Dany, you'll get a chapter about Tyrion, about Jon, about whoever. And so you're kind of flying all over the place. And I love books like that. I love books like that are so character driven. And the world is just so immaculately built and just so easy to see, perfectly fleshed out, perfectly. It was immaculate. It was maybe the best book I've read so far this year. I don't know, it wasn't better than Barbara's book, but Barbara's book was amazing to me. It was so freaking good, you guys. And I'm in the middle of the second one. My freaking audiobook credit just expired on Libby, and it's gonna make me get on the wait list for it again. So I'm just gonna have to buy it and listen to it because I can't wait. It is so good. So good. So I'm definitely gonna do a deep dive video on the whole Game of Thrones series because it deserves one. It's incredible. But just know that if you've ever been on the fence, if you're a Game of Thrones fan and you're like, should I read the book? Should I not? Read the books. Read them. They're so good. So good. I gave the first one an easy 5 stars. It was the best book ever. I loved it so much. So that was a good way to end my month. And let me tell you, I'm not in a book slump anymore, okay? Like I said, I'm in the middle of the second one, and they're freaking long books. They're over 1,000 pages. So it's gonna be a journey, but I'm along for the ride. I'm hopping on that dragon and going with George R.R. Martin, okay? And I'm a little stressed for when I get to the last book that's come out, because I'm gonna be very antsy and anticipatory of the next book that, you know, hasn't come out in 20 years or whatever. So I don't know that we're ever getting a finality to the series, but oh my gosh, it's just so good. I can't not read it. So cross that bridge when we get to it and be heartbroken then. But for now, I loved it. It was a great way to cap my month and get me out of a book slump. So hopefully I can finish that series soon. So those are the 5 books that I read this month. Let me know down below if you have any book recommendations for me. Have you read any of these books and you agree with me, disagree with me? Tell me all your thoughts down below. And don't forget to like this video, especially if you want to see more book content, and subscribe to help us toward our goal. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.